All right, welcome to Friday 420 Live. I'm Michelle Nevedo, and today I'm so excited to be joined by Cody Reeves. Cody is a founder of Mystic Fruits and a certified mycologist. And Cody, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Michelle, for having me.
Very excited to have you on. So let's jump right into it. First question for you should be a pretty easy one. Psilocybin or psilocybin? How is it pronounced?
Psilocybin is the correct Latin pronunciation. It took me a while to get used to that, but psilocybin is still completely acceptable in the academic world. Nobody has corrected me one way or the other.
Yeah.
When I went through some of my certifications, I was actually in a field with a few British gentlemen, and you think psilocybin sounds weird in proper English, you should hear it in a deep English accent. Makes it
What
even
does that
more
sound like?
fun.
I'm not going to say. I won't put you on the spot.
They over exaggerate the psilocybin, and it's almost Australian to a touch. It's quite interesting, but I frequent the psilocybin because it academically is correct, but I've never ever corrected anybody otherwise.
Yeah, psilocybin. I'll stick with that for now. The next thing I wanted to jump into is so you're a cannabis cultivator, as am I, and we know in cannabis that there is such a thing as strain specific effects. There are strains that or cultivars that produce an uplifting effect. For some, there's cultivars that produce a sedating effect. And I recently came to find out that it's similar in the mushroom world. And from what I understand, this is due to the different alkaloid composition of the mushrooms. But can you speak a little bit more about that?
Absolutely. It's one of the things we work really hard for in identifying our mushrooms is also being able to kind of explain some of the different effects that are associated with these mushrooms. I tell people all the time I wouldn't have grown 147 strains in my life if they all did exactly the same thing. The universal key when I first started this mushroom journey of mine many years ago growing was as a cube is a cube, the world of wild. In the sense that every cubensis is got one set of medicine, and that's what makes it work. And as we found out in cannabis, that it's not just the THC, it's the minor terpenes, it's the mix of CBDs and different subcompounds that makes up a really intense strain. We have the same thing in mushroom wool. We have identified 10 major alkaloids right now, and I think there's like 5 to 10 sub sort of micro alkaloids that they've identified. And believe it or not, they've just discovered the first set of 5 terpenes actually in mushrooms. So we are really just kind of now getting deep into the science of what these things are made of and what those actually do. We are at the tip of discovery. There are tons of programs right now doing research on isolating these different compounds, baeocystin, norbaeocystin, psilocin, psilocybin, the whole list, and sort of isolating them and finding out what makes each one a certain thing. Right now, my company, what I do is we gather a ton of field data. We try to get as much stuff tested as we can and then kind of compare notes. Certain people, say that this strain is highly visual per se, and we can kind of look and see what it's highest in that category to see kind of what's creating that visual experience, or what's creating a more mood uplifting strain, or one that's creating pain disassociation or for pain management. We really can't tell 100%. We would love to be able to look at a mushroom test report and be able to say specifically this does this. But the psychedelic world is kind of funny in that way, and biology is funny in that way that even then I give 10 people the same product, same strain, and we'll get 7 roughly the same reviews back, and then there'll be 3 wildly different ones that kind of throws the test out sometimes. So we tried our best to kind of get that 7 people because that's the general gist of a strain. If you actually look at our products online and actually what we provide our fruits, we provide a brief history of the strain, and we also try to include some expected effects to a certain degree. So it can just create a more educated and informed customer and whatnot. I noticed long ago when I was growing these strains, I got into some really neat strains and hybrids that nobody had ever heard of. And you look at a menu, it's kind of like cannabis. You look at a menu of names, unless it says lemon and you know you like lemon, you don't really know what you're going to actually get into.
Right.
So people were just kind of pointing to a name that looked cool to them, and there's so much more to it than that.
Hmm.
So it's kind of the beauty of being able to grow these multiple strains. I always try to keep sort of one from every category on hand. We generally try to keep one for pain management. It's sort of a low visual property, a very chill mood environment, very calming strain. We try to keep one that is not overly visual, but its primary function is visual. To have those visually stimulating properties. Same thing with mood enhancer. We have a hillbilly strain that we're quite fond of here in all of its different forms. It's known for reducing social anxiety. It loves to be in a group of people. It's lightly visual, but it's more ethereal. So it's not disorienting for people to consume in public in small doses and whatnot. And I always joke it loves walks in nature and whatnot. So that has its own sort of group category and whatnot. We try to keep one from all the way around so people can see these different strains and kind of see the different effects. And generally speaking, I can take most mushrooms and find out what you do and don't like about it and point you to the next best one. And I have yet to not find a strain for somebody that they didn't just love. So
yeah, similar in cannabis, we know that
research.
Yeah, and similar in cannabis, we know that people have different. Everybody's biochemistry is different, so people have different reactions to the same strain. For instance, an uplifting strain for somebody might be panic-inducing for another person. A sedating strain for somebody might not be sedating for another person. Might be uplifting for another person.
Correct. Pharmacologically, that's with any medicine. That's why we have warnings on medicines. May cause this, may cause that. It's generally safe for the mass amount of public, but there is a 10% group that will, for all the people it helps, there's a 10% that it will make them sick or have adverse reactions. And that's not to be expected with any natural product to be 100%, about it. Yeah. So we try to take care and do the best we can with giving people sort of the best information that they can. Pharmacology and harm reduction are hugely important in my business. We always lead with education and information. Every time we're out vending or doing something or giving talks, we always have multiple books for people that they can check out. Giving these talks and speaking, about it in an intelligent fashion and in a way that's not sort of mixed into the psychedelic world. We don't have enough people speaking educatedly about it with true research and with true background in this stuff. And that's sort of been my biggest goal, was to become sort of what I wanted to see out of the mushroom world when I was taking care of myself medicinally. There was nobody to talk to about these strains. You never met the grower. You could never find the same strain twice, even if the guy did know what it was. So I really struggled and kind of had to find my own path through it. And I said, if I ever do this, that's what we're gonna blow the gates open, and we're gonna really give people help with this, because it's a tricky world. It's tricky science. It's shrouded in mystery, lore, and a whole bunch of misinformation. And we try to correct that at every turn.
And a distinct lack of research. And
it is. And it's one of those things that's been around for so long. It's got a lot of misconceptions. It's got a lot of associations with negative bits. Everybody's heard of bad trips without really knowing what that necessarily means. Any experience that's negative without education is a bad experience. Just because it happens with mushrooms doesn't mean it's any sort of different. And now with better training, with better access and whatnot, we can sort of turn those moments, and we can actually do things to actually kind of adjust the situation enough. Because again, beforehand, what did you do? You called the guy you got it from. He didn't really know what to do. You didn't dare call the police or poison control center, which unfortunately enough is what a lot of people have had to do. So kind of having access, I probably give access to myself, is because of reassurance to the customers. They have somebody they can call and ask. I may not answer my phone immediately, but I will answer my phone, sort of thing. We send with all of our products. It's a mixture of valerian root and passion flower. Nothing scientifically will actually stop an experience. all the rumors and tips you've ever heard in your life are not true. What we can do is we can sort of soften the negative effects. So the valerian root and the passion flower extract capsules just sort of create a nice calm. They're both sort of anti-anxiety formula, just all natural. And what I like to say is it just sort of adds a nice parachute to the experience. We can't stop it, but we can slow it down and calm the anxiety, which is typically where a lot of bad experiences start. People get in their heads and they feel anxiety and they don't know what's going on, and they processing a lot along with a lot of feelings, and it can get kind of overwhelming. If we can just bring that down a touch, we find most people, can rewrite the ship, so to speak. And it works as an amazing placebo too, because once people feel that they have somebody to talk to and they have this backup plan of something they can use, they're instantly more at ease. They know they have the access that they need, and they don't have that anxiety like, oh no, something's bad's gonna happen, something bad's gonna happen. Like nothing bad's gonna happen, and if it does, I have the tools. And that's wildly important in my world, being able to practice safely, and give people, a chance to, explore this beautiful medicine without, a lot of the old trepidations that we associate with it.
Yeah, there's a question from a member of our audience that asked 70%. You mentioned 70% experience the same. So they're asking, do those 70% experience the same effect, or just a very similar type of effect?
I can't say specifically same. It's not like a verbatim sort of experience, but most people can, because most people lack the proper terminology sometimes to explain these things. We kind of try to educate them that this is an uplifting experience, or this is a visual experience, rather than, I hate even saying it out loud, but tripping balls, or any of those things that we hate actually using. We're trying to get rid of those words so we can talk about this in a more educated way. So in that regards, yes, there's a commonality between the 7 reports. They all had a mostly visual experience with a little bit of mood enhancement, with certain amount of, social or non-social kind of aspects, whether it's more of a chilled, relaxed experience, or whether it was, again, more like energetic and, want to be, social kind of experience. We take those, and like I said, we do our best to kind of whittle them down and not take too many minor notes from one side or the other, so that, people also aren't, expecting something that's not there. So it's still loose science for sure. We do the best we can with the research we have and with the feedback from our customers. And one of the beauties of my job is we're in contact with our customers constantly, and we're constantly getting feedback, and we're constantly asking for reviews. And the citizen science in this a lot of times comes from the actual citizens. I can only research so much, and I know that my biology is different than everybody else's. So it's really key to have, the sort of outward input from other people and whatnot.
Yeah, cannabis was similar, but in the years before legalization, we were all citizen scientists. We experimented on ourselves. We figured out how things work and how this strain affected us and how that strain affected us, because there was no research available. There was no information out there besides what we could figure out ourselves.
And that was the same. The research is far ahead of its time. When I first started into the psilocybin world, the testing, literally when you went and tested, it was for the amount of psilocybin in there, and that was what you tested for, the peak of that. And it was a lot like cannabis testing. When I was thinking back, in the old days, that was what you got when you got your report. Your percentage of THC in your plant. You didn't get all the terpenes. You didn't get all the subcompounds and stuff. It took us years to figure those out and kind of be able to test and dictate what those all do. And we're really at the infancy stage of mushrooms in that regards, of getting that data back and whatnot. People, now that we have a sort of more free hand to do these testing through places like Johns Hopkins and Berkeley and Columbia, they are just breakneck speed trying to get these things tested and figure out, what all this can do. We know that there's a lot. And every day I have new research coming at me, for whether it's the newest trend is longevity. In rat cells, they were testing rats with psilocybin. They found that unhealthy cells sort of renewed themselves, and certain cells actually lasted longer by some crazy number, like up to 70%. So there's a belief that there's sort of a longevity for humans and whatnot. They say that, over time they can probably access the doors genetically to, prolonging actual cell life, which would of course make all of us grow less old and fast. And that's really interesting science to me. But we're at the tip of that. It was one of those weird things they discovered while doing other things. So another big one right now is pain management, and how pain is perceived in the mind. Most people don't really think about it. If they've ever had a psilocybin experience, typically, unless you're having like a mild discomfort to something in the mushrooms, whether they be mycotoxins or something that might have been grown with the mushrooms, which is very common, those can associate with like sore muscles and sore backs, like you can associate with. But a lot of times when dealing with a perfectly clean product, you actually don't really experience pain. It's not that you're not experiencing pain, you're not perceiving pain. I've noticed it myself. We will get heavily into a psilocybin experience, and I all of a sudden don't feel the stresses on my back or my neck. All of a sudden, it's just not, you don't perceive that pain in the moments. So there's really some interesting data being done on that and how that can affect folks. There's a strain in my arsenal. It's probably one of my most popular ones. I'm actually sold out right now. It's called a blue magnolia. It's a mushroom that was found between the Alabama sort of Mississippi border, grew down on the southern coast and whatnot. It was a landrace strain at one point in time, but it has amazing relaxing properties to it. It's definitely, we call it our fireplace mushroom. It's meant to sit in a cozy couch and just sit by the fire. Very low visual aspects to it, but pain relief and just sort of calm and sort of just relief of a lot of tensions on top of everything. We've had a lot of success with that mushroom in treating patients with that for pain.
You mentioned that the research recently about it helping with your cell life, basically. Do you know if that test was, the research, did it show that was it specific to brain cell life, or are we talking about the entire body?
I'm sorry, I think you broke up with that last part.
Well,
one more time.
Sorry, the research that you referenced just a moment ago, was that referencing you said that it improved cell life, basically, and is that in the brain cell, or is this, you're talking about the entire
body? It was
body?
in brain cells, and it was in a lot of soft tissue cells, and it was, I believe, done in some different organ cells as well. That's why it was kind of impressive to find, because it wasn't sort of specific to one area or another. It sort of affected everything. So I would love to be able to dig into that deeper. This is all brand new science kind of coming out, and as with a million papers sitting on my desk, I probably should read harder. That's when I look forward to getting into more, but it's again still kind of in its infancy and whatnot. So I'd be very interested to see kind of how that works and whatnot, and what comes of these processes. We have genetic testing now in mushrooms, which I just love. So it can help establish what an actual strain is. We have a lot of problems with misnumeration in the mushroom world, calling something that it isn't, it being labeled as something that it isn't, being grown, and oftentimes not to the grower's fault. Somebody will grow some, send you a syringe that they swore came from, a Thai elephant, that is not true at all. And that's not to the grower's fault, unfortunately enough. That's kind of a breeder's problem. So we're now able to kind of take these landrace strains, and a lot of mycologists that have verified strains, and send them in for genetic testing, so that we can log these, and we can kind of see where everything's been coming from. Along with that genetic testing is going to become genetic manipulation. As we've been hearing coming from the cannabis world, that we're really close to genetic manipulation and being able to kind of be designer strains. We're really looking down the road for that in psilocybin as well. That's one of the big sciences right now, is what they call deneutering psilocybin, and taking away a lot of the psychedelic properties while still leaving all the medicinal properties. And there's several drugs that are flying through the FDA and through different departments right now that are mushroom psilocybin derivative, but actually have no psychedelic qualities. And they're proving to be equally, maybe not equally in my opinion, but pretty effective for a lot of people and whatnot.
Yeah.
So excited to see what we'll do in the future with being able to kind of manipulate the gene cells and kind of get mushrooms designed for, specific needs and whatnot.
You mentioned earlier that psilocybin has the ability to block the perception of pain. And I know that to be true for cannabis as well. It's very similar. It doesn't take away the pain, but it blocks your perception of pain. Also, I know what you referred to in a mushroom experience. I've had that same experience as well. I have degenerative disc disease. On a mushroom experience, that pain is gone, man. Like during the experience, when it comes back when it's over, but during the experience, my muscle spasms gone.
It's pretty remarkable. It was something I never really paid attention to. I was too busy kind of dealing with this minute intricacies of each mushroom experience, because it's the very first time I've ever felt like I've experienced with anything, experimented, with anything. In the mushroom world, when I first got into it, I wanted to know everything. I felt kind of like a Dr. Seuss book. I did it in the dark. I did it in the light. I did it. I'm happy. I did. I'm sad. Let's figure out what these mechanisms are and figure out what this thing's about. And, all these different strains, trying to, dig deeper into them and find some of the minutia properties to them and whatnot. Especially as an experienced consumer, I can kind of overlook some of the first and secondary effects. So it's been truly an experiment in life, being able to play with these and whatnot, and having access to these, really high-end hybrids and all these landrace strains that a lot of people just don't have access to. I have a strain from every continent on Earth except for Antarctica. And that's just because it hasn't melted enough for me to go get that one yet. But we have an African strain, we have an Australian strain, we have European and Asian and South American. The cubensis mushroom was actually classified first in Cuba, hence the cubensis. It was classified in Cuba first. And I have a copy of the original strain that was classified first as a psilocybin cubensis, straight out of Cuba. It's a beautiful mushroom, but by no means the first mushroom that was, here on Earth. They literally exist on every single continent. We're still discovering new strains. Last year was sort of all the rage that they found a new strain in Africa, as a matter of fact. So that was kind of exciting that there was a whole new classified mushroom coming out of Africa. So we're still finding them. They're still out there, and there's still some we don't know about, which kind of makes my job fun, because there's really no end to this rainbow. We're at the infancy stages, and we still have miles to go. It's something I don't feel I hope we always have a better grasp of, but I don't think it's anything we're ever going to get to the full tip of the knowledge of and whatnot. But the science is coming hard and fast, and with more people being interested and more talks like these happening, it's becoming more common in everyday vernacular, and people are less afraid to talk about it. And more that happens, the better information we're going to get, and the more we can ask for better information from universities and such. So.
And when you say landrace strain, that's similar to in cannabis? This is a strain that is native to a particular region that's been growing there for a long time.
Region. Correct. The core mushrooms are typically defined by their region. So a lot of times you'll see a Costa Rican, or you'll see a Panamanian, or you'll see a Cuban, per instance. There's a Puerto Rican. There's all these, but they're generally demographically, where they are is generally what they were named after and whatnot. There's a strain called the Amazon. The Amazon strain was found in the Amazon. That's what is the mother of what we currently know as the penis envy. Terrence McKenna came down. He got copies of that, isolated it in his labs back up in the Northwest, until what we see now as the penis envy. And that has, of course, taken a million forms since then. But all mushrooms came from these original landrace strains, just like cannabis. And over time, they've been isolated or manipulated or even bred to form different mushrooms and whatnot, creating all these exotic strains that we now have. Much like cannabis, we have kind of an issue with that, though, because there's a lot of not solidified science in this. The people aren't doing the heavy lifting and the work to actually sort of stabilize a strain. Much like cannabis, you can kind of just throw a couple plants together and throw a couple plants together. And over time, you're going to get all these different genetic mutations and different problems in your cannabis plants. It's the exact same thing in the mushroom world. Everybody's curious about the enigma mushroom. It's this weird brain looking mushroom. Well, that's actually a mutation of a tidal wave mushroom, from where somebody just that over time they've isolated it and knocked it around and chased all these cool variations till it was just a total mutant from what the original mushroom was, which became kind of a fad there for a while. So people were stressing out strains to come up with different mutations, because some of those come in super high psilocybin content, sometimes twice as much as the highest competitor as far as a regular standard mushroom goes. And that led to its own world of problems, because now we had these genetic offshoots, and we had stuff that shouldn't have been mutants turning up mutants. We had stuff that would show up kind of different, different sort of appearances in the same tub. You'll get an albino over here, where you'll get a squatty one over here, and you'll get all these different forms. Whereas you generally like to see, a nice clean flush of similar looking mushrooms. And although it's led to some really cool different strains and whatnot, it does create problems. It's hard for the average grower, unless you really know your breeder or know your provider for whether it's your spores or your liquid cultures. You never really know what you're really going to get, just like cannabis with their seeds and whatnot. They put most pretty picture of a mushroom on the front cover and sell you a syringe, and you get home and you're like, why is this not look like that? And it was the same way in the cannabis world, to be 100% honest. So we pressure now folks to really work the strains, really sit down with them. If you breed two together, keep breeding that same one until you're getting the exact sort of flushes you'd like to see, where you're getting the right look that you're looking for. You're getting very little variance. Sort of same way in the cannabis world, where we take a mother and father, we pheno select the one we like, and then we breed it into itself until we get a sort of copy that when it makes seeds, it makes copies that are just kind of like that. So it's very interesting. Some of the techniques and some of the issues from cannabis really rolled right on over for me in the psilocybin world.
And in cannabis, when we breed, we take the pollen from a male and we add it to a female plant, and that will create seeds, and that's how we create new varieties, or continue the same variety. Without getting too technical, how does breeding take place in mushrooms?
I don't know if I can do this without being too technical. Monokaryons and dikaryons. Mushrooms have generally one or the other. You generally try to find one that's a monokaryon and one that's dikaryon. And you take separate cuttings, put them on a plate, you take a microscope, get really down fine on it, and they make what they call clamps. And in those places where you have clamps, you'll cut out of the agar dish, and it's a whole process. It's very technical. I was trying to do it without breaking brains, but there's really no way. That was one of the hardest things for me to learn when I got into it. There's a whole bunch of new methods. There's a technique called smash technique, where they'll literally just smash two plates together and start taking cuts from the center and just kind of guessworking it. Sometimes you'll end up with literally two strains in one bucket. Basically, you'll have some show up like whatever mother you were chasing with whatever father. Sometimes miraculously it works and you actually do get a hybrid, but it's kind of rare. So there's a lot of techniques, but yeah, that's one that took me some booking.
I wanted to talk about microdosing a bit. It's coming to light that mushrooms in microdose form can be helpful for depression. And I wanted to share some about my own experience. A couple of years back, we had a kind of dramatic family issue that happened, and it triggered a deep depression inside of me, and I went through a really hard time. And part of the way that I found my way out of that was through microdosing. And I found that what it did was, when you're in a depressed state, the world is kind of gray. Everything, there's no spark. There's no, you lose the joie de vivre, you lose the excitement about things. And part of what mushrooms did for me, and from what I understand for other people, is that it kind of gives you the wonder back again. So it gives you this sense of wonder, like the light coming through the trees is a little bit more beautiful, that the song of the birds is a little sweeter, which connects you back to yourself and back to your happiness, right? If you can experience things brighter, or uh, feel a little bit more love, come out of that gray zone, um, you can begin to touch the happiness that was there, that's still there. And granted, mushrooms alone, I don't believe will do it for a very difficult mental state. You need help. You need to find someone to talk to. You need a therapist. It's essential. Mushrooms alone won't cut it. For
I
a very
say that all
difficult.
the time.
Yeah.
We overuse the word magic and magic mushrooms. Yes, they are magical, and yes, they have all these properties, but used alone without any guidance, without sort of any introspection, they're just like cannabis. Yes, you'll get medicinal properties. Of course, you'll have an experience and whatnot, but not nearly so what you would get from a guided experience and whatnot. You're not just going to magically take mushrooms one day and all of a sudden be a happy person. It doesn't work that way. You're not going to all of a sudden be over some trauma from your past. That's just not how it works. It's not that kind of magic. And I agree with you. It really does. It takes a plethora of ways to be able to either do it guided through a counselor or guided through a spiritual ceremony, in social groups and circles. A lot of research has come out of how it's just as beneficial one-on-one as it is with a large group and whatnot. Feeling more in tune with other people and kind of hearing other people's experiences and kind of getting this group relief kind of thing is very powerful for a lot of people. So having all these things accessible to folks, I think, is wildly important. And yes, on your microdosing, you almost hit the nail on the head. That's how I describe it to people all the time. Everybody asks, well, what should I expect here? And I just tell them it's a little pep in your step. The day's going to be a little bit brighter. It's just everything's going to have just that one nicer note to it to kind of set you at ease and kind of put you back in touch with, that, and everything may be okay. The sun's shining a little brighter today. I can get it, even if it's just for one more day. A lot of folks do need to take it day by day, and it really kind of helps guide them and whatnot. As we're learning in microdosing, there's many ways to do it. There's not sort of a one answer for everybody. I've struggled with it, to be honest, in the past, trying to find the right measurement for customers and whatnot, because not the same microdose works for everybody.
Right.
Microdosing is technically defined as subperceptual, but I've always hated that term. We found clients don't really like subperceptual. They don't notice it's there. They're like, is it working? I take this every day and the science tells me it works, but I'm not feeling anything. So is this, so we call it, I like to prefer sub-psychedelic threshold, which is just below where you're starting to feel psychedelic. It's just right up to that mood uplifting portion. It's just up to the colors being a little more enhanced. There's not the sort of disorientation or any of that stuff. It's just up to that level is where we find the most efficacy, because people can be like, okay, I understand what this is doing now. Okay, this is great, and this is the way I can feel and not feel like I am the panic or I have to miss work or something, or I can't pick up my kid, or oh my goodness, what am I going to do? It's really at a lower level. That's sort of a beautiful hum, if you will. That just it's a sort of a glow for you, and we have found that works better for folks. Most people can then definitively say, okay, yes, this definitively works for me. Whereas we have some people we treat for cluster headaches. We typically say every other day for microdose with the weekend off. So psilocybin has a half-life of 48 hours. So taking it every other day, you never build up a chemical tolerance to the medicine. It's flushed all the way back out of your system before you take your next dose. So medicinally, you're getting the full efficacy of your microdose if you're taking it every other day. And then taking the weekend off is an easy day to remember how to stay on track on your weekdays. But also, most people have those 2 days where they don't necessarily need it. They are home or they're enjoying something differently and whatnot. And that gives yourself a little time to process as well. Kind of
to touch base.
We always
to touch ground again as well, right? To touch ground with.
Exactly. And then we have some folks that we are treating completely differently, whether we're treating for Alzheimer or whether we're treating for things like cluster headaches, that we give to people every day. Because we're not worried about a tolerance to the medicine. We're treating something completely different here. So for those folks, we find that it's more effective to use every day. And they're not worried about feeling the effects as much as they're worried about feeling the relief effects.
Right.
So we kind of handle that differently. And then everybody's got their own programs. Some need them when they feel they need them. Some people are on a regular plan. There's really not one single answer to how to microdose. But having that's something, you can have in multiple forms. You don't have to just kind of every other day. There's different ways to do it.
Yeah, I've noticed all of that to be true, and there is that bit of like an afterglow that you feel the next day. So even on when you don't microdose the next day, you kind of still feel that same sort of, maybe a little bit of that wonder still in your mind.
Yep.
But I also wanted to point out how small of a variance in the amount that you take can influence that shift from I don't feel anything at all to, okay, I think I feel just a little bit of something. I mean, for me, it's like 0.02 of a gram difference from like not feeling anything at all to like, okay, I think I feel a tiny bit kind of thing.
It is, and that number is different for everybody. And from strain to strain, potency is different. Even from mushroom to mushroom, it's a really difficult thing for us to manage as sort of, if you're looking at it from a clinician's perspective and whatnot, because even in the same bucket with the same strain, if I test two different mushrooms, they're going to test at different potencies. So you kind of have to grind the whole mix together and homogenize it to get a base note. Well, that only works for that batch of grind. You do a second batch of grind, it's going to have some different properties and levels of psilocybin. So even if I get you within, we'll call it 150 milligrams, 0.15 grams of psilocybin medicine, that can actually have different micrograms of actual psilocybin content, even if I use the same mushrooms. So it was one of the things we had a hard time in science trying to be taken seriously, because, you don't go to a doctor and he gives you a guessed amount of any medicine. If he gives you 250 milligrams of something, it's 250 milligrams of something. Right. And in the mushroom world, unless you're dealing with precise extracts, you're very rarely going to come across that. And especially when, most people don't understand that the average cubensis mushroom, the psilocybin content is somewhere between 0.5% and like the highest measuring one right now is like 2.4%. So of your entire mushroom, only 2.4% of it at the highest level in psilocybin cubensis is actual psilocybin. So now your numbers drastically reduced, and you're really talking that it takes a very minor amount up or down. So it's hard. It's very difficult, but we do the best we can with it and whatnot. More testing, more homogenizing of products. That's why my gummy was very, very important to me. I spent 3 years bad mouthing the edible industry because, much like cannabis, one, it's a great place to hide poor work. Mushrooms have grown with mold or bacteria or yeast or just aren't your best. They're real easy to hide in chocolate. And it's really hard to get a very homogeneous product. Everybody's had that experience where they've had a chocolate bar and they've eaten one side of it and nothing happened, but they had one corner off the other side and they were all the way loose and whatnot. That's a homogenization problem. If we're going to be treated seriously in this field, we really need to get that tightened up. We recently had our product tested for homogeny for our gummies, and we tested within a 0.05 RSV. So our gummies are accurate within each other of 0.05%. It's one of the lowest numbers tested right now. In fact, it's up for a gold medal in the Colorado Psychedelic Cup this year. We're very proud of the product, but it's that homogeny that was so important to me. Why I'm so proud of this award coming up was we worked really, really hard to make sure you don't get any of those hotspots, and you can treat them medicinally. You can use them as a microdose. You can use them to stack your products. You can have one little. They're 350 milligrams is our gummies, so it's 0.35 grams, just above a microdose for a lot of people. And it works great because you can then stack them. You can have one and see, oh, okay, I could have a second one, whereas it's kind of a guessing game with mushrooms.
It feels very much like we're in the same place that cannabis was, in terms of when we're referring to it as medicine. There's no standardization. There's no, I mean, there's different cultivars that have different effects for different people's biology. Yeah, the same one will have a different effect for two different people. Like, how do you, beyond, I mean, none of us really want to go to taking a pill. But beyond that, how do you find, yeah.
Again, it's going to come more with more testing and with more stuff, with more information. We can get that measurement sort of better. We can equate the amount of milligrams somebody's used to in psilocybin and kind of do some math for how high a psilocybin level is in a certain mushroom. So if, at 1%, your dose is, let's say it's, 0.25 grams, we can equate that and then kind of measure it against other mushrooms and whatnot. But we're still a long way from that data. What few shops that we've seen over here in Washington, D.C., they actually have recreational mushrooms in the District of Columbia. The shops actually sell them whole there. And I can't tell you one that has a test lab on any of their products and whatnot to even see. And we struggle with it, just like cannabis. Turnaround times are long. Right now, testing's still expensive. And with a multitude of strains and stuff, we're doing our best we can to keep them tested and keep, the information up to date. But by the time I get a test back, oftentimes it's, 2 to 3 months later. So it's kind of difficult. We understand some of the problems. There's great groups out there like Triptomics that are working really hard to streamline that process, make the data publicly available through these database sites and things, which is really neat. And they're really pushing the edge of testing really in the whole psychedelic world, whether that be mescaline-containing cactuses, dimethyltryptamine, 5-MeO DMTs. They really test a lot of stuff, and they're doing excellent work. I love those guys. I've learned miles and miles from them about the sort of biochemical compounds that are associated with some of these mushrooms, and being able to better understand what we're working with. And it's a pleasure to work with groups like that, being able to contribute to the public data and whatnot. We love being out there. We have a great binder I have it on my desk, and we take it with us everywhere of, all the tests we've ever done for all of our products, for our mushroom gummies, for our straws, for our different strains and whatnot. And if nothing else, even if it's not the test for that specific batch, we at least have a baseline people can see, and they can kind of understand what a mushroom kind of compound is. And said it's so difficult because again, there's not a standard dose. Everybody's biology is different. Everybody's weight's different. Their experience is different. So it's sort of the hard one. The hardest question I get asked all the time is, well, how much should I take? And I have to take a big sigh and explain to them, well, it really depends on the person. It's not like,
and what you're treating.
It's not like the old days now, now that there's people like me that, make themselves available to you. It's not like you only get this one shot. I bought and ate the mushrooms from this guy. I'll never see this guy again. Right. I got one shot at this. I'm going to do it. And, now we have kind of access and whatnot. So we tell everybody, start slow. You can always eat more. You can't uneat anything. No. It's okay to start with half a gram and see how you feel. It really is. Some of these mushrooms are far more potent than people remember or even understand. And it's not like the older days, there's now with better techniques for drying and storage. Mushrooms aren't being deteriorated. So not that they're necessarily stronger. We're just not losing potency over time through better storing met properties. Here at Mystic Fruits, we store in airtight, light-proof bags. We seal ours right in the lab. So the first time our guests ever hold our mushrooms will be the first time they're ever held with a human hand or see the light of day. That really preserves the medicine in there. Rather than them being in a clear open bag and being out in the sun or in some dude's backpack or, Lord knows what humidity or gross things that come along with that. Where these are different. So we try our best is the best way I can kind of say it. And we tell people, again, start slow. It's okay to start small. You can always enjoy more. We can get you more product. You don't have to worry about it. You can find us. We can communicate. It's not anything anybody needs to rush into either. We always recommend sort of building yourself up if you're new to this, so you're not overwhelmed with experience. I never want to see anybody scared off from the medicine. And we hear nightmare stories in my career all the time of, well, somebody sold me a half ounce of mushrooms and I thought that's how much you did. And I had a terrible experience. And I'm like, no kidding. No kidding. Huh, go figure.
That's a lot.
Yeah, I've heard nightmare stories, just awful
Yeah.
stories that just roll your socks.
Yeah.
So we we try to explain to people, and that's our thing. We're trying to change the perception of these medicines and whatnot. And by doing so, we start with harm reduction, starting people off slow, starting them off educated. Every conversation, before I ever give anybody any products or they buy anything off of me, we start with a conversation with them first. We always start with, is this right for you? Mushrooms are not for everyone. This is not a thing. It's kind of like alcohol. Pick a thing. They're not for everybody. You may have adverse reactions that are just your biological adverse reactions. We don't know some of the subcompounds and stuff. Some people are allergic to a garrison, which is common in a lot of wood mushrooms and a lot of mushrooms that you just wouldn't come in contact with on every given day. Unless you take a turkey tail tincture or something, you would never know that you had a sensitivity to it. It's not in your everyday button or shiitake or mushrooms. And we see that oftentimes. A lot of people will be like, man, it just doesn't sit well with me, and it really hurts my stomach. And we can do now tests to find out. And we've come across it a handful of times where people actually have a sensitivity or a downright allergy to garrison, which is kind of fascinating. But there's so many layers to this. But being able to communicate and being able to talk about it and sort of educating people is the beauty of my job. Unfortunately enough, no doctor out there is doing it. My doctor, my physician comes to me whenever he has a question or whenever he has a patient that has a question. He's like, I know I'm the doctor, but he's the natural medicine guy. And I spend a lot of my time educating in the doctorate field, unless there's a doctor specifically interested in it and goes to these conventions. Your average, care physician just is either wholly uneducated about it or just was, they just don't train in, natural remedies and a lot of natural medicines and stuff. And there's so many options out there for how to better take care of yourself, through nature. And we always try to lead that way first before we start dealing into heavy psychosis drugs and things with SSRIs and at a height of just mass prescriptions. We try our best to help people with the pharmacology and help people understand, what these are and give them an opportunity to try before, we always try to say you should try natural before you start getting into some of these wilder prescription medicines. But to a lot of folks, that's the information that's given to them. They're trusted physician. These doctors go to school for 4 to 8 years. And then, they're trusted, not realizing that, as a customer or as a patient, that you're not even trained in these natural things to even tell me, that rosemary may be good for this or that, all these different medicines naturally could, we can tackle with. So my wife, actually, she's the herbologist on the group. She worked into all of our topicals and tinctures have different essential oils and different remedies and whatnot. And that's another fascinating science. We've both moved to pretty much an all natural lifestyle, and thankfully neither one of us are on any medication. We regulate our blood pressures and things through the ground mushrooms we use in our 7 mushroom blend. We keep our immune system up through the same blends and whatnot. We tackle immunity, just all number of things. So thankfully I'm not on any medication, which is kind of rare in the world these days.
I wanted to mention that we talked earlier about, if you're using microdosing to treat like depression, for instance, that it's important to find somebody to talk to as well. The mushrooms by themselves aren't going to solve your problems. Important to find a therapist or someone to talk to. But I wanted to mention, it doesn't have to be a psychedelic type of counselor. It doesn't have to be somebody who's involved in, you don't necessarily have to let them know that you're taking a microdose, because it might actually, they might not want to treat you, which is unfortunate. That's just the situation.
That is very unfortunate. We see that a lot in veterans. We'll work heavily in veterans groups, and a lot of them are not even allowed to mention it or even bring it up that they do, because they'll disqualify them for different medications or different therapies right off the bat, which just boggles my mind that there's a natural option out there and it's not pursued first, or even it's, held against you if you do.
Yeah.
So yes, but help comes in all forms and whatnot. It could be down to a good friend. And yes, it's not something you necessarily have to disclose unless you're either comfortable disclosing or feel like you need to. Otherwise, that could be something personal to you. And finding somebody to talk to could be as easy as finding a friend, finding, support groups in different therapies. Church is fantastic. Microdosing in church, fantastic for those who have those religious beliefs and whatnot. So it's really listen to your body, listen to your heart and mind on this one. Where you feel comfortable is a great place to figure out your thoughts and figure out where you're going with this and find your happiness again. If you're dealing with depression and symptoms of that.
We have just a few minutes left, but I wanted to touch on, before we end, the relationship of between cannabis and mushrooms and other mushrooms. So, for instance, I take lion's mane daily. Paul Stamets, the mycologist, recommends in his microdose regimen, recommends lion's mane taken with the microdosing. And I found that to be helpful as well. Lion's mane
We do the same thing with ours.
Yeah. Yeah, good.
They are great for brain function. It's often considered the Adderall of the mushroom world, but for cognition, my running joke is, since I've taken lion's mane, I can remember what I need when I go to the store now.
Right? Yeah.
It's bizarre. I actually know what did I come in this room for happens so far less in my life now.
Right.
And yes, we use those in our microdoses as well, and not only with the cognitive forms, they pair very nicely for when you're dealing with psilocybin. A lot of times the brain is even learn to sort of rewire itself up just a little bit, where there's sort of some misconnections. It's known to regrow neural pathways and whatnot, and the lion's mane really does boost those things. Paul Stamets calls it stacking. And we do the same thing. It's very common in the world. I believe he actually uses a little B2 as well, vitamin B. And he really likes that. I've not dug into the science on that one. Right now, we just try to put in as much lion's mane to the capsules as we possibly can. You're really only dealing with about 250 milligrams of space on 0.25 capsule. So we have limited space to kind of work these things in and kind of whatnot. That's why they're best used with tinctures, or definitely like your mushroom powders or mushroom coffees and things. You can get a heavier dose of those mushrooms than relying on getting it through your capsule kind of thing. But if you're not going to take anything at all, it's certainly better than that. So yeah, absolutely. I was interested to find, when I was sort of reading back through my notes, there is currently no clinical studies being done on the medicinal relationship or benefits of psilocybin and cannabis together. We know a lot of the medicinal benefits of psilocybin over here. We know a lot of the medicinal benefits of cannabis over here, but there is currently no research being done on any sort of connection between the two. Most of the evidence is either written anecdotally, but I was kind of dumbfounded when I was kind of looking through the files and digging through a lot of these research lab reports that I have, that there's currently not one on the market currently. So really we're at the infancy stages there too, of kind of fully understanding the use of cannabis and whatnot. I was instructed when we were going through harm reduction training and whatnot, we were told if you were going to use them both together, to reduce both doses, and then to use one or the other. Sort of, if you're going to use a little cannabis, use it a little bit before or coming down on the other side and whatnot. And
not while the mushrooms are coming on.
No, cannabis has a much quicker inset time and whatnot, and at the peak of an experience, that you don't necessarily know where that peak is until you're kind of there and sort of sliding back down. You're just kind of up and up and up and up. So where cannabis can have the great benefit of being a calmant and relaxant, and a lot of people, it does give anxiety, especially some of the sativa strains and things that kind of make you more that way. This can be very easily compounded when having a mushroom experience and whatnot. We never recommend edibles and psilocybin. Edibles, the timing is just too tricky on them. The math on, unless you have a really, really accurately dosed and kind of what you're consuming, it can be pretty squirrely, and you don't want those two to meet in a bad place. We've Fortunately enough, with the popularization of mushrooms also comes the popularization of recreational use. And these cannabis events and stuff, people selling them open, which is all well and good, but not giving the customers information. They can buy THC gummies in the same place they can buy their psilocybin. And they're like, "Ooh, it's a party today. Let's have some both." And 3 hours later, we see them laying in a field in a bad place.
Right.
It's something to be considerate of, for sure. There's definitely some mutual benefits. In an intense experience, it can sort of, using the right strain can sort of alleviate those stress and those anxieties and kind of help bring you back down. A lot of people like it for the reapproach, as I like to say. I never like calling it coming down from a medicine. You're sort of reapproaching your state of normalcy and whatnot. And that can be sort of a hard shift for a lot of people. So cannabis is oftentimes very effective for folks to kind of ease their way back into things and kind of being able to bring a lot of those things down with them, as opposed to it being a fleeting experience. So it's really interesting that there's not a lot of research going on right now in that regards. Yeah, we'd love to see more. I'm sure medicinally that there are some co-benefits. We already know psilocybin goes where with a lot of stimulants, hence cocos and tobaccos and stuff, and traditional ancient use and whatnot. Very, very synergistic. Same thing with stone fruits and mangoes and things like that. Have very synergistic properties to psilocybin and complement them very well. So we know there's things that are out there. We just have yet to dig into it and really kind of dig out the roots and figure out what's going on between these things. So
yeah, this is such an incredible space to watch for the research that is just starting now. So much to learn.
It is. I literally get a new email every single day of something new that's coming around, just in the psilocybin world, much less the rest of the mushroom world. When we're talking about chagos, rishis, lion's mane, shiitakes, oysters, maitakes, I mean, I sound like a snake oil salesman sometimes, because the information that comes in, I'm like, it reduces blood pressure, it regulates sugar in the body, it's immune boosting, and you just go over and over and over. It's like, there's no way it does all that, and there's now clear evidence that it in fact does all of these things and whatnot. We've had several clients that have been able to manage their blood pressure to a level they've been able to come off statins and different blood pressure medicine just through using a mushroom product. Paul Stamets famously, I have to be careful with the term because Paul likes to say he cured his mom of cancer. I don't love that term. we have no definitive science on that. His mom reverted, but it was due to a red turkey tail tincture that he had. And I have no doubts that it played heavily into her recovery and whatnot. And that was completely unheard of until, or wasn't even looked at or studied really to a certain degree until it kind of came into that effect. And now we're looking at that through different lights. A mushroom that's grown, as on trees for earliest time. And mushrooms themselves are unique in that they can sort of self-evolve. Mushrooms are constantly evolving themselves to accommodate different climates and deal with climate change and whatnot. There's a great little mushroom that started growing inside of Chernobyl, a little black slime looking mushroom that's actually eating a lot of the radiation. And it's just kind of like eating it out of the air and whatnot. So there's big studies being done with this mushroom on whether that can be something to sort of clean up radiation spills or highly radioactive sites. And when we're dealing with space and a lot of radioactive materials and stuff out there, it's be a beneficial thing to have. It's almost like carbon eating bacteria in the sense that it really does. So they're just fascinating. We find something new every single day. The cool that they do, and they adapt in a new way, and we just, it's amazing.
I remember reading about a study that was it was hopeful that there's a species of mushrooms that were breaking down plastics. Did you hear about that?
I did hear about that. The name's going to escape me now, but I have heard about that. There are certain ones that do that. One of my favorite projects going on right now, my corporate sponsor, North Spore Mushrooms, they're a company that grows supplies. They're actually teamed up with the University of Maine, and they're making buoys out of mycelium cakes. Because polystyrene and polyethylene buoys out in Maine are a huge problem, just disintegrating and falling into the ocean and being eaten and ingested by everything there. So they're actually starting to make these natural ones that break up naturally and just made out of mycelium, which is, basically the mushroom roots that last, and then they deteriorate away and become an all natural product that goes back into the ocean, which, I can't remember, the number is staggering for how many, particles and stuff it keeps out of the ocean a year, just in that alone. So there's so many things. Some of the new stuff they're doing. Gentleman just built and insulated his house with blocks of mycelium and hay, and it's apparently an amazing insulator as well. All natural, lightweight material that can be spawned from nothing besides some grain in a sack and some proper cultures. So now we have a renewable, building material that can just be done, and it's all natural, and it's, it goes on and on and on. And
so cool.
It's cool to see everything that everybody's doing with these things now, beyond the medicinal side, bringing it into modern culture and whatnot.
So cool. And there's so much to learn. We are running out of time, but I wanted to thank you, Cody, so much for all that you do, for all the education that you guys spread. And it was such a pleasure talking with you. Can you let our viewers know how to find out more?
Sure. You can visit our site. Website's mystic-fruits.com. You can find us, our page on Instagram, mysticfruits207. We're on Facebook as well. Find us on LinkedIn. My name's Cody Reeves. We have Mystic Fruits. Any one of those mediums you can check out. We have a lot of the essays that I write. Currently doing some editorial pieces for Nugs magazine, and sort of working as a psychedelic editor there to write some articles and do strain histories and whatnot. So we'll have all those linked to the website. And
that's Fat Nugs magazine. Yeah.
Yep. Fat Nugs. Yep. Correct. We love them. And it's catch me out touring and talking and whatnot. This year we're out more. We're showing up at different cannabis events and stuff, and we're showing up at different mushroom events. So I missed Telluride Mushroom Festival this year, but I will not next year. So hopefully we have more opportunities to actually, get in touch and find me. But definitely check out the website. We have all of our products. We have information with all the strains. There's actually a spot on my website that says "Ask a Mycologist." That's a direct link to me. Literally, it's a private email. You can ask anything you want. I'm the only eyes that will ever see it. It's specifically for any questions that you have about medicine, mycology as a whole, whether it be growing, whether it be, medicine that you want to use for psilocybin, whether it's the effects of these different medicinal mushrooms. I love questions I can't answer, because it's going to go make me look them up and research more and learn something new today. So there's no such thing as a wrong question. I love doing this. It's been such a benefit to my life, and it's a pleasure to share with others and bring it to the light I think it deserved.
Yeah, it's obvious you share a lot of joy in doing this. So thank you so much for joining us, Cody, and we'll see you soon. Thank you so much. We'll talk
Absolutely.
to you.
Look forward to being back.
Yep. Awesome. All right. Thanks everyone for joining. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye.